Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alchemize with Alanna. Quick heads up, we may have some Wi-Fi issues, so hopefully we're going to do the technology gods, and they're going to support us in this. But welcome to the show, and to start, for those of you that don't know me, and you're probably thinking, what's this alchemizing topic or name? I wanted to share why I chose Alchemize for this series, because alchemy at its core is about transformation. And yes, most of us know it in terms of turning, say, lead into gold. But here we're talking about something more personal and practical. I'm pretty practical in terms of how I approach the work that I do and how I work with clients. So really, to me, what it's about is taking what life throws at you, chaos, challenges, uncertainty, and transforming it into wisdom, clarity, and bold choices. So alchemy isn't necessarily magic. It's really the everyday opportunity to turn pressure into possibility. So here's how it can show up every day. It could be how you handle a tense meeting at work. It could be how you make tough decisions when the pressure's on and you don't want to disappoint other people. It could be how you choose to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. And in business and in leadership, it's the art of transforming what could hold you back into something that propels you forward. So today we're exploring the theme that so many high achievers and leaders wrestle with, which is how to trust yourself even when it feels unnatural. For some, this might sound like a no-brainer, but most of us were not taught how to really trust ourselves. We were, in essence, programmed to do the opposite. We were taught how to follow the rules, meet at the expectations of others, and to check the boxes sometimes. And when we start listening to our own inner voice or our instincts, it can sometimes feel foreign or even uncomfortable. So trusting yourself isn't necessarily supposed to feel comfortable at first. In fact, if it's uncomfortable, that's how you know that you're doing it. And if you've ever felt like that inner voice was too quiet to follow, that's the moment that it matters the most. So before I introduce you to my guest tonight, there's a few big ideas that we're going to dive into. So the first one is about how rebuilding self-trust often happens through discomfort, not by avoiding it. It's built in the moments of discomfort when no one else has the answer. And sometimes you might be prone to getting answers from others first before trusting yourself. So if you're one of those, check in with yourself on that. Also, why inner trust can feel so unnatural at first. So part of that is because the work world trains us to follow rules, to be in compliance, which sometimes is for good reason, and to be a team player, all with good intention. But real leadership also comes when you learn to listen to and follow your own instincts. And lastly, what reconnecting to yourself really looks like, not in theory, but in the day-to-day. So trust is not something that you're waiting for. It's something that you rebuild by doing it in the practice. As the conversation happens, we'd love to hear from you in the comments, what's resonating with you. I think I cut out for a moment. So we'd love to hear from you in the comments, what is resonating with you, what struggles you yourself have experienced, and any questions that you'd like us to dig into if we have some time. And also, if you catch the recording later, we'd love to hear from you. And this was meant to be a conversation, not necessarily just a broadcast. So I also want to ask the audience, I'd love to start by asking, do you find yourself trusting? Does it feel natural to you, or does it feel foreign? Is it situational? There's no wrong answer, and please share it in the comments. So with that, my guest today is Chris Sherrick, and he is a multi-venture entrepreneur, investor, and advisor focused on scaling startups, accelerating growth, and building high-trust partnerships. He's the co-founder of Exegy Partners, where they help early-stage founders bridge the gap between vision and execution. And he's also co-founder and CEO of Tonatop. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Chris. A hearing health tech company reimagining patient care through clinical partnerships and advocacy. So welcome, Chris.
A lot going on, Alanna. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Well, I had the pleasure of being on your show, and it was a fun conversation. So I can't wait
I
to get
had
into this
such a
with
blast. Yeah, I can't wait to get alchemized today.
you. Perfect. So the first question I have to kick us off is, when in your life or in your business have you had to trust yourself through discomfort? Like, what did it feel like in that moment? And how did you know it was the right call?
No warm-ups, Alanna. I don't get to shoot practice shots before we dive
No,
in.
nope. We're just shooting for it.
See, this is
Going for
this is why you're an effective, efficient coach. I love it. Right. So, I mean, there are so many things I could talk about here. Let's talk about how I'm feeling right now in the present, which is I have a whole lot going on in my life. I am moving to Mexico City temporarily for 6 months, starting next Monday. I feel on edge, slightly unbalanced, and in my day to day, I haven't been as productive as I would have liked, and still am not. Right. So, even showing up to the show right now, there is a feeling of anxiety that I felt in the past, especially earlier on in my career when I had done less self development work, which is this fear of not being able to show up in the way that I want to. And what you're talking about, showing up with a level of self trust, to me, whenever I feel that physiological, how I experience it in my body, it requires more self trust than ever. It's actually about leaning in to the moment, because that fear for me typically comes up when I feel a bit unstable or when I feel a bit tired, physically exhausted. And there is the fear that I'm not going to present myself well because of how we've been groomed into certain expectations for how people perceive us and how that affects our value in society. So my goal for me today, and when I experience this in my business life or personal life, is just to show up as I am, trusting that I am putting my best foot forward today and my best intentions, and that whatever I say or whatever I do is rooted in that and is rooted in the values that I hold to myself accountable to. And at the end of the day, I can't change or totally influence how people react or take in what it is I say. So all I can do is take solace and trust myself that what I put out there is was the best I could do at that time. And honestly, that's how I move forward often. It's you have to just intend, like put a lot of intention around putting your best foot forward in a moment and do your best not to resent the result.
Mm, gosh, yeah. Um, you said so much there, and this is coming up a lot for a lot of people. In fact, just the other day, I had a conversation with someone where they've been overwhelmed physiologically with everything that's going on with them too. And often when we feel it in a physiological way in our body's actually trying to communicate with us.
Exactly.
Right? It's giving us feedback that sometimes we need to slow down, or we might need more rest, or we're being a little bit too hard on ourselves.
Yes.
And maybe it's right, like putting a little less on your plate. And the person I was speaking with the other day, when I asked her, what would you rather, what's the message that you'd rather be focused on, or how would you rather be feeling? And they said to give myself some grace. And so
Yes.
if anybody's listening to this who's going through something similar, like even myself, I'm feeling much better today and yesterday, but weirdly, over the past week and a half, 2 weeks, I've just been feeling really intense fatigue and exhaustion that is not normal for me. I usually have a lot of energy, but I just gave myself permission to say no to doing certain things, to resting, going to bed earlier, and just being kind to myself. And sometimes even being around other people can drain my energy. Not because I don't like being with people. It's just I know myself. And so sometimes it requires a deep sense of self-awareness as well. So
It absolutely does.
you're doing a lot right now. So Yeah. Give yourself
According
some
to my
grace.
introduction, yeah. I mean, look, the reality is that anyone who has a lot of things going on, you only have so much time available in your day. You're one person, right? So I thankfully prioritize setting up ventures or pursuing projects with a team of people that I trust. That certainly helps a lot. So when I am feeling down, I can be vulnerable and honest about that, and they often pick me up. And I will do the same for them. I have also been experiencing an uncharacteristic level of fatigue recently. I expected to be related to this big transition period of my life. I don't want to say big, but it's a transition period, and transition periods are always exhausting. I feel like I've moved places and I've put stuff in boxes, taken them out at least 5 times in the last 2 years. So
Mhm.
I'm sick of looking at cardboard. I think that's part of it.
I went through something similar and I did something a little crazy that is really hard, I think, for a lot of people to do. And I got rid of about 95% of my belongings.
That is amazing. I was just talking about with my partner before this that because she is starting to pack for Mexico City,
Mhm.
and she will be busy and traveling this week for work stuff. So she did a lot of her stuff earlier today, and she expressed to me that the majority of her stress was coming from the fact that she had so many things. And that totally resonates with me. What a first world problem, in a sense. I don't even know if people say that anymore. Am I aging or dating myself? But like I've always been a minimalist, and in part because I have challenges with ADHD, and so typically the less things that I have to, um, track, organize is just going to be less draining on my day to day. The more I can streamline, the better. The more I can systematize, the better. So when it comes to managing a lot of these things, it's very important to me from a business perspective, especially to be really clear on the outcomes, to understand what I am responsible and not responsible for in line with those outcomes, and to put forward a realistic way of going about it. That is often where I feel like I personally get into trouble when I either set an outcome that's too difficult to achieve, or I don't give myself enough time or people power to achieve it. You set yourself up for failure in that way, and often a lot of those things can be avoided with just especially when you're moving so fast between things. It is easy to continue to dive headfirst and to jump into each one of them. But to
Mhm.
your point, taking that breather for a moment can also give you the ability to reset and to recalibrate and say, what are some of these things that I'm focusing on right now that I don't need to focus on because it's taking up a bunch of my time or energy space, as well as do I need to actually realign expectations, whether it's
Mhm.
with my family, my partner, my dog sometimes, right? Or folks that I deal with in business that, hey, this is actually going to, we're going to need to push this out a week, right? And you can decide whether or not that's a big deal. And often people will work with you in those situations, but it's better than delivering something that you don't feel proud of, because you've overextended yourself. And if that's the case, you have to work on that separately, right? But there are ways to back yourself out of situations that you may have gotten yourself into that feel a bit overwhelming, especially for those of us who are uh, high achiever attempters, right?
Yes, high tempters. I love it. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
in responding to some of what you said about the difficulty in achieving things, I think a lot of that has to do with getting better at prioritization and truly like what is urgent and what isn't, and being realistic about how long things are going to take and what is life or death. I mean, really, because some people get to a place in when they get upset or triggered and they get in their amygdala, like everything becomes urgent. Like everything has the same
Oh,
level of
yeah.
urgency, but it doesn't. And this is where we start to lose topic at hand. This is where we start to lose trust in ourselves, because we potentially are taking on too much Whereas if we just got real with ourselves and real with other people, and then part of it, an aspect of this too, is caring about what other people think.
Yes.
And not wanting to let people down. So,
And we talked
yeah.
about that on my show.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Why do you think that discomfort is a critical part of rebuilding trust with ourselves?
Discomfort is, to your point earlier, your body is constantly giving you signals of what you may or may not need to do. Discomfort is typically a signal, at least for me, that I'm heading in the right direction. Now, there is a level of trust that I've had to build with regards to that feeling. So when I feel that discomfort, especially if it's within the process of something that I am pursuing very intentionally, and I know it's new, I'm going into it with the perspective that I'm accepting discomfort in that journey, then discomfort is something that tells me I'm on the right path. Where I get into
Yes.
trouble is when I feel that discomfort and it is unplanned for or unexpected. That is where I tend to slip into personally my own, uh, not bad habits, weaknesses, challenge areas of improvement I'm constantly working on, which are recognizing when that is happening. And my tendency is to withdraw. And when I withdraw, you lose the ability to be external and to realign expectations, especially when working with a team that is there to support you and to support each other. And it starts to become counterproductive. And it definitely starts to go down that road of, oh, I'm going to let these people down by not being able to show up in the way that I want to. And the more you start leaning down that road from a thought rumination perspective, you start to pile it on. And when you pile it on, it's even more difficult to be able to get out of that state of withdrawal. So
Yes.
that is something that I've found is significantly important for me to navigate when I am either whether I am building self trust in a new situation or continuing to build on self trust in things that I thought were nailed down, and remembering that the reality of the world we live in is a state of entropy, right? So
Yeah.
even things you thought you nailed down, things change, so you
All
have
the
to
time.
constantly be open to that change.
Completely. Yes. Well, that discomfort, it's the story that we have around what the discomfort means. And if we can normalize it for ourselves and and make it, it's the meaning that we put on it, the story that we tell about it. Because depending on if it's I don't usually speak in terms of positive or negative. I like to speak in terms of productive or unproductive. If we do it in an unproductive way, then that feeds into the potential for self-sabotage. When really it's just about practicing it. And if we just practice it,
Yes,
we're not going to beat ourselves up, and we can get some stuff done. And the more that we do it, the easier it gets. The easier it gets, the better it gets. And somebody once gave me a mantra, which I love, is it's getting better and better every day, better and better in every way. And there was a couple of weeks where there was a lot piling on for me, and the person who gave me that mantra, it came from a very unexpected place. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to pay attention to that message. And I wrote it down and I started saying it every single day, multiple times per day. And first thing in the morning, for sure. I woke up and I'm like, it's getting better and better every day, better and better in every way. And it just immediately put me in a good mood and set the tone for myself for that day. And it's little things like that where it can settle any heightened energy or emotions that we have. And it's from that place that we can look back into trusting ourselves to make good decisions and take good actions. So
definitely.
anything else you want to say about that before I move on to another question?
I would agree that mantras are an incredibly effective tool. I used to think that they were uh, too ethereal for me, at least. And then I started to really take therapy seriously in my mid 20s. And I really had to rewrite a lot of the narrative I had in my head for how I dealt with certain things, emotions, how I wanted to show up in different ways. And it did take saying a number of things out loud. I think I would cycle through a couple mantras a week, but I'm sure I made a list up to 50 by the end. I would put a
Wow.
few to the side and I would add more, right? So I'd like probably over the course of 12 months, I cycled through that many, and I would do a very similar process. The importance of saying it out loud is truly has to be emphasized, right? Because we think a lot of things, but saying things out loud really, I'm sure you know more about it scientifically than I do, but it cements it in a way that just thinking it does not.
Yes, because, well, over the past year to 2 years, I would say I've been a geek about the frequency of everything. And words have a frequency, music has a frequency, clothing that we wear, the material has frequency. Our voice has a frequency. When you say something out loud, pay attention. So those that are watching this or listening to this, when you say something out loud, say it slowly, like I'm doing right now, and pay attention to the resonance that you're feeling in your body, in your head, in your. And I think I just cut out?
It's okay. I just cut out. Only for a second.
Yeah. Okay. So as you're saying something, pay attention to the resonance of how it feels in your face, in your head, in your body, in your chest as you're saying it, and you'll feel it when you start paying attention to it more. You're going to feel it, and there is that frequency. It gives it life, and it gives yourself a different energy versus just always thinking it in your mind. It's really, really powerful. All that to say, some people like to keep things private. I totally appreciate that and respect that. I'm not saying you have to say everything out loud. If you can feel a difference in it and practice it, there's such thing as mirror exercises.
Yeah, I was doing it in the shower, right? I mean, it's not like I was doing it on a live show.
Yeah. So that's something. It's a very subtle but powerful technique or tool to pay attention to. But so where I want to go next is from the perspective of trusting ourselves versus getting external advice or paying attention to the rules. Like, why does it feel more foreign to trust our own instincts versus listening to somebody else? Because you would think that it would be the opposite.
Let me think about that one for a second. So why is it so foreign to trust ourselves versus listening to someone else? That's a really interesting way to phrase that question. Because I hadn't thought about it with the someone else at the end of it, but realistically, what you're implying, which is a true statement, where if you are not listening to yourself, you are listening to some, let's call it nurture signal that you've processed at some point, someone else's opinion or the way society does things that you're giving into ultimately by giving up control of whatever decision you want to make with that information as opposed to as a result of, right? So when it comes to self-trust and doing things how I want to do them. Interestingly, I've been playing around with the concept recently, mentally, around entrepreneurship and the freedom that founders seek through this path, or the freedom that most people seek through their careers, through personal ambitions. I have a feeling that a lot of our actions are driven by freedom in some shape or form, a freedom that we personally desire and has a definition that is going to be unique to all of us, not something that is specifically relevant to, let's say, how people think about freedom in America. Freedom in my world is a freedom of how I spend my time. It's freedom of how I spend my energy, a freedom of who I get to work with, who I want to work with as a result of their value alignment with me. when I start listening to someone else, it is generally because of a fear that the way I am pursuing my freedom is not going to be achieved. So it is almost a fear of failure. And I want to, a fear of failure of being able to achieve freedom. And that puts me in a position, again, of withdrawing. And if I withdraw, I start to give up control. And when I give up control, I put myself in a position to let the world happen to me, as opposed to for me to take a proactive step in the direction that I want and have to then claim accountability for whatever result occurs. When the world happens to me, or at least how I felt this in the past, I can step back and say, well, that wasn't my fault. And I can remove myself from the accountability equation. And I lived, I especially as a kid, I lived a lot of my life like that. I experienced some difficult events with the loss of my father when I was in university. And a number of those emotions were dealt with by saying, this is not my fault. And for what it's worth, that is not my fault. How I deal with my emotions, how I grew from that experience, that is on me. And that is something that I continue to work with. But to me, freedom is fear's greatest fear. So as you're pursuing these things, the more I am listening to myself, the more my fear mechanism is kicking in, trying to stop me from achieving that freedom that I want to get to. Because at a point of freedom in your life, the fear that is stopping you from transforming in that direction, it's a finality that makes fear's purpose completely powerless and therefore useless. So that's why before, when I alluded to generally when I feel that discomfort, it feels like I'm heading in the right direction. It is because I feel the fear amplification as I get closer to the freedom that I am trying to put in place or to achieve.
That's super powerful. It's that feedback that we can get, right? Yeah, there's so much. It can be so complex, and what we pay attention to. So, um, and this makes me also think about, like, what do you notice in leaders or entrepreneurs when they're disconnected from that inner compass? I know how it's felt to me. I've been guilty of it. There's been times where I had self-doubt. I didn't trust myself. And so I sought advice or suggestions, or I even hired other people to help me work through certain things. And in the end,
Sure.
It didn't work out because I should have just trusted my own instinct, because going into that relationship or engagement, something didn't feel aligned or didn't feel
Yeah.
right to me. Or in the process of it, it didn't work. And I will also say that in one of those experiences, I found my voice, not just my inner voice, but I found my voice and I actually spoke up. And when I started to do that, that then gave me the confidence to do it in other areas of my life and in my business, and how I'm showing up as a coach, and how I, engage clients or potential clients. So anyway, all right, I'll go back to the question, but like, what do you notice in entrepreneurs when they're disconnected from that inner compass?
Definitely. The biggest thing is there is reactivity as opposed to proactivity. So there, whether it's emotional, whether it's in action, there tends to be very drastic pivots. With what you mentioned before uh, around the patience of a personal roadmap or a business roadmap, things do take time, and it's very easy to stray from the plan if you're not constantly aligning yourself against it. And if you don't have a clear sense of your values, to then take the status quo or to take a bad day and to let it influence how you go about doing everything. When you are a leader, you do have the power to be able to influence everything, and that could be for the good or for the worse, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So that reactivity comes in a couple different forms that I see. One is people who try to take way too much control of a situation, and those who try to relinquish a lot of control from a situation. So, and of course, it's a spectrum. of how that presents itself. But interestingly, and this is a conundrum I see quite a bit, which is there is constantly the battle founders have with themselves or entrepreneurs have with themselves between my instinct is telling me to do this because it'll be faster and better. And they know that they need to delegate, right? So there is a difference there of you have to unpack that, right? Because there's a lot there. What they're saying at the end of that sentence is my need is to do this, or I know I need to do this. And the front end of that statement is actually, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So I am going to do it this way, even if it's suboptimal. It's almost a justification for why you are not moving in the direction of what you know you need to do. And the opposite can be true. I read this book. I guess it's pretty popular at this point. It's called Buy Back Your Time. And in that book, they have the concept of a hand grenade, the entrepreneur coach, which is they use an example of as things got tough in a business, one of his clients that he was working with, I believe the author, Dan Sullivan, was working with a business leader, and they had the issue of when shit hit the fan. Excuse me, when stuff hit the fan.
Yes.
Sorry, I swear a lot on my show. When stuff hit the fan, that they would leave and just go on vacation, right? Or when things were going well and they wanted to see whether or not their team could handle it, even though they know they couldn't or they didn't have the right processes in place, they let things blow up so that they could justify to themselves that they were needed back in the business every single day, right? So, and he called that out as a hand grenade. So just a quick 2-word check, which is, hey, are you doing this because you can and you want to? Or are you doing this because you want to create a situation that is going to blow up in your face and therefore justify whatever the fear is that you have and that is holding you back from doing the thing that you want to do? So there's a lot to unpack there, Alanna, and I know you go very deep with this, and this is why your work is so important, because there truly are so many unique lived experiences that each of us have that influence our abilities to be able to work with other people and to be able to make decisions in a way that is aligned with our inner compass.
Yeah. Well, and I just caught a comment in the chat. I think Jesse, you said it about that when we confront our fear, it actually frees us up. Whereas if we avoid it, that's where the energy drain can come in, which is so interesting because I've experienced
Absolutely.
that myself, right? Where, you know, even recently. So I won't say the name of the organization, but a few months ago, I joined a networking group to meet more people, and because a lot of my business comes from people I meet or speaking or getting referrals. And I just terminated my membership after only 3.5 months because and I could have let it go longer. Like at first I thought I'm going to give this a year. Then that became, I'll give this 6 months. And then it went from 6 months to, I think I actually want to leave now. And I wasn't, you know, like I could feel it. Like, am I avoiding the conversation and confronting this for myself and actually saying, even though I just joined a few months ago, that I'm leaving, or am I just going to hit it head on? And once I hit it head on and I just pulled the Band-Aid off, I felt so much better. And I met with the president and I said, I'm leaving the group and here's why I'm leaving. And part of it is because, you know, I hold myself to a certain standard. I'm not perfect. You know, look, I'm not perfect. Every once in a while, I'll be late for a meeting or there'll be a technical issue or, you know, I'll space about something. But for the most part, I look at my calendar, you know, in the first thing in the morning to see what my day is going to be like. I check it all throughout the day to make sure that I'm on time for meetings. I mean, the other day I had 6 coaching sessions and I'm like, oh my God, okay, I need to make sure that I'm keeping myself right, like to be on time, like hard stop, like don't go over, you know, and also take care of myself, like make sure I've got something to drink, you know, use the restroom, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
but I also hold myself to a certain professional standard, and I didn't want to tolerate the bad behavior of people not showing up for meetings, not accepting meeting invitations, saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot." Well, okay, well, if you forgot with me, am I going to want to refer business to you? I don't think so, because I'd be afraid of how you're going to show up with somebody that I'm referring you to. So,
Sure.
But I had to confront that for myself. I'm like, what do I do? Do I give this more of a chance? And I felt so freed up after I had the conversation and said, I'm leaving the group and freeing up. You mentioned about freeing up time. I'm now looking at how much time in my calendar I can now use for other things, where I can feel more productive and I can dedicate it more to my own business and dedicate it to something else.
It's such a powerful exercise, and it especially in entrepreneurship, it does not happen organically. There is nothing that exists in a cycle like you would when I worked at Verizon. You ran quarterly business cycles because the business has to report on quarterly earnings, and everything trickles down based on that, right? So you are operating in extremely heavy, rigid quarterly cycles. Startups I've worked at, since I've worked most of my career in product management, you operate in what they call agile sprints. So you are working in 2-week cycles, but you're also operating a quarterly roadmap, and you are defining outcomes that you want to achieve in a certain number of quarters. But unless you're sometimes on that product team in a startup, there is no cycle for executives sometimes. And you end up in this awkward, weird cycle. The product team is running a regular schedule. You are not, or you're a solo entrepreneur. You're not building a digital product who's running with a team running agile. And so you lose this concept of time. And what you said stood out, because one of the areas that we focus on when we work with founders with XG partners is very simple. It is about putting in that time and installing it into an operational rhythm into that founder's life of how are we going to reflect on our priorities and how are we going to make clear decisions, and we will help you, because a lot of times people just need a second voice in the room. And this is why I believe in surrounding yourself with good people that you trust. But how are we going to be able to make decisions on everything that's here, and what are our priorities, and how are those priorities going to change based on this new thing that's come in? We can't just make the sandwich bigger, right? You've run out of time here, and now the sandwich is up here. So what are we going to do about it, right? And without that device in place, that would have just trickled on until that overcapacity either ate the person or something fell over in that process. So even something as simple as an intentional time cycle around how you approach whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, those small check-ins can be critical for being able to free up your time, reset your energy, realign your priorities or your strengths against whatever is in front of you, and to realign the strengths of your team, or maybe receive a signal that you need to hire and fill a gap based on what you saw and reflecting on whatever your previous time cycle of work was, or achievement or progress. So just, it's kind of like therapy and coaching, right? The reason why you do it on a regular basis is because without that regularity, it's really difficult to get the data points you need in time to be able to reflect and decide how you want to pivot and move forward with that information.
Yeah. I was coaching, ironically, as I went through this, I was coaching someone the other day where when they showed up to when I asked, how are you doing? They said, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. And they admitted that for whatever reason, this time of the year, like August, September, because of the cycle of what they do, they're a manufacturer. This is the time of year where they feel it the most. And so I said, okay. And I said, what would be helpful to you in this moment? And this person is very initiative. So even my suggestion of making, like, not prioritizing a list, but just doing a brain dump of everything that you need to do. They're like, I've already done that. I said, great. And then I said, okay, have you gone through this and looked at realistically how much time these things are going to take, and then plug it into your calendar? And they said, no, I haven't done that step yet. And then they also admitted that as we were talking it out loud, they said, they had three computers on their desk, all
Mhm.
these tabs open. I mean, I have one, and I've got, probably 2 or 3 browsers open with God knows how many tabs way too many. I know I'm not alone in that practice, but can you imagine having 3 computers and doing the same thing? And then they said, you know what? I'm just going to shut some of these down. And as soon as they started doing that, it's like all of a sudden they could breathe. And then they said, okay. And then we started to map out when they can put some of these things in their calendar. And sometimes, they said, even just talking this out loud with you right now
Definitely.
is making me feel so much better and making me realize this is so doable that I'm doing this to myself. And they had made everything just as urgent as everything else. And if that's not always the case, because it's not that not everything isn't, it's not that everything isn't important. It is. It's just that, like earlier you said, there's only so many hours in the day. You are one person, and what are you going to do with your time? And that was the biggest takeaway at the end of our session. I always ask, what did you get from our conversation today? And they said, the value of my time.
Yeah, that is a really interesting and difficult one, really, because the value of your time is something that is, I feel like I have to remind myself of that constantly because it is so easy to drift away. My executive assistant, Nicole, will tell you that I go through that process maybe once a month. And so we do it very intentionally, where we have a monthly priorities review now booked into the calendar, where by the end of the month, I might be feeling overwhelmed. I might not, but there's a regular practice of, here are all the things that from our little internal quarterly planning that we do that are on the table. Are these still the priorities for how we want to move forward? And if I arrive overwhelmed, I need to unpack it. But as I unpack it, I can start to very clearly see what are the areas that I'm spending time in that just do not require my time and energy. And why or why not I'm doing it is not important in that moment. For me and for my team, it is about being able to move us all forward in an aligned capacity. That is why I strongly recommend those of you who are out there and operating as a leader in a business, and if you're not already, working with someone like Alanna, because the ability to then move through those exercises without overwhelming, you can be vulnerable with your team, but you don't want to overwhelm your team with a therapy session right in the middle of a planning session. It is your accountability to be able to recognize those moments of overwhelm, and then to be able to take it back to a therapist or to a coach, and then to unpack, hey, why did I get to this moment like this? And what was standing in the way of me being able to move forward? And why did I load all this up? Or why wasn't I doing this one thing? And you can start to pick those pieces apart. But just doing the practice of mapping it all out for yourself and doing it with someone else. Like I said, I do it with my executive assistant. She is privy to everything that I'm working on, but not to the same level of detail I am. And she doesn't need to be. Often she is there as a support mechanism and as an organization complement to my sometimes chaotic brain. And that's very effective. So find that person for you and find someone you trust. And if you don't have that person, speak to Alanna.
Thanks, Chris. Well, you just organically brought up a little bit of a question I was going to ask you, and I'm wondering if you might suggest anything else. But it was, what are some practical ways that you've reconnected with yourself when life or business gets noisy? And so what I'm hearing in that is, once a month you dedicate or allocate time with intention, and you get help and support from someone who knows how you think and knows how things are, how you run your business, to help you work through all that. But do you have any other practical ways or suggestions to work through the noise in that way?
Yeah, I've implied this already, but I am a huge mental health advocate to begin with, but an avid therapy and therapy goer, and I utilize executive coaching very often. It is a ritualistic part of my week to have a session with my therapist or executive coach booked in. I put that time in before I put my work commitments in, because that time is to be untouched, and it is how I hold myself accountable to remain healthy in a mental state to be able to execute on whatever it is that I'm committing my energy to business wise and how I'm showing up in my personal life. So that is one untouchable thing that has been so powerful for me. I know it is not for everyone. I happen to be someone who is very self-reflective, and I like to look at things objectively with others and to process them to be able to move things forward. Other people have different processes, but that is an option, and I promise you it works. Another method I've adopted recently, which was brought to my attention by a doctor who specializes in ADHD, who I saw last year in the fall. They recommended I start doing heart focused breathing meditation and breath work. So
Okay.
we commented this on post, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it on my show. But I do heart math, or I attempt to do heart math as part of my daily and evening routine, because it does an incredible job at being able to reconnect me to myself. I find that it is, whenever I need to make a big decision, doing a heart focused breathing based exercise allows me to hear my intuition in a way that not much else does. Especially when I know what the answer is. I don't need a big session to unpack it. It is just about quieting the moment down so I can hear what it is I need to do, from the heart, right? Not from the mind that's overthinking it, or the gut that might feel sick from the pressure that the mind is creating. It's coming from a place of self-intuition, which is cultivated by that self-trust we're talking about, which is built over time. And it may not present itself all the time or as easily as you would like it to, but it's the practice of all of these things that allow you to continue to cultivate that trust in yourself over time, which allows that voice to be heard through the noise, especially when you give yourself the tools like heart math to be able to quiet things down a bit more so that you can hear that voice even if it's faint.
Well, of course, I love hearing that, because as a heart math certified facilitator, I
Oh,
have
I
some.
didn't know that.
Oh, you did it? That's so
No.
funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, so yes, so I am a heart math certified facilitator, and I have some of those techniques that I practice myself. And there's one in particular that I love introducing to my clients. I don't enforce it. If somebody says, that's not really my thing, great, no problem. We don't have to do it. But I would say 9 times out of 10, even people that in the beginning, they're like, I don't normally do stuff like this, but that actually felt really good. And it was a nice way to get present. And so they're open to it. And we start doing it at the very beginning of every session when we come on for literally like 2 minutes. It's like a 2-minute, it's called the shift and lift. And it's such a great way to get present. And the first step is heart-focused breathing. And how it goes, I'll read it really quickly. And if anybody's interested in this and you want to reach out to me, send me an email or a message on LinkedIn, and I'll send you the handout. No problem, for free. So it's 3 simple steps. And the first one is heart-focused breathing. And that one in and of itself is its own technique. So even if you just did this first step, it would be helpful. So it says, focus your attention in the area of the heart and imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual, and find an easy rhythm that's comfortable. You could do this whole process in 20 seconds. I like to do it in 2 minutes so that we take a little bit more time. So that first step will take about a minute. We'll do heart-focused breathing for a minute, which the first time you do it will feel a little bit longer. And then step 2 is activate feelings of kindness, appreciation, genuine connection, or an attitude of deep listening. Like, how beautiful is that? And what I do is I just think about all the people that I'm connecting with that day, appreciation for this client sitting in front of me who said yes to me, walking beside them on their journey, on their path. And then also for the session that day, that I want to genuinely connect with them, heart intelligence to heart intelligence, and deeply listen for how I can provide them value that day. That's how I use that second step. And then the third step, and it's got the word vibration in it. And when people hear that, I think most people think of it as kind of like this hippy dippy thing. What they're speaking to is frequency. It's your frequency. So step 3 is radiate these heart qualities to raise your vibration, your frequency, and help lift the energy field environment that surrounds you. So what a beautiful way to get present, to just breathe through your heart. There's more hearts and there's more intelligence here than there is here. They can measure it with an electromagnetic frequency device, by the way. So 100%.
The science behind it is incredible. I mean, you can look up the Heart Math Institute, and they measured how far the EM frequencies from your heart radiate, and I believe it's like 30 yards. It's something that is pretty significant compared to your brain waves, which are only a couple feet. And I know they've done studies of, I think it was they took a blood sample, and they put it literally 30 yards away from their participants in this test, and from the heart-based breathing, the blood sample 30 yards away started to activate.
Well, yes, I've heard that too. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah.
It was fascinating. So there is legitimacy behind it. I felt the same way hearing it for the first time. I thought it was a bit hippy-dippy. But the results have been, the results speak for themselves. They calm me down, they tune my focus, and they allow me to context switch, which is sometimes a challenge for me with how my unique neurodiversities present themselves. So being able to deploy a tool like that is extremely important for me.
Beautiful. Well,
and one thing I'll add on top of that is exercise, one that I have not been doing in my recent transition, and I can feel it. But another, small thing I learned from that doctor who I've been working with for a little while is 15 minutes of zone 2 cardio can do more for your stress levels and your mental health than most things, right, that require 15 minutes of your time. So I've found that even on my hardest days, 15 minutes is a great low expectation lift I can set for myself. And zone 2 is like a jog, right? We're not talking about you strapping up to sprint in open fields, or to pump iron, or whatever it is whatever workout fad is out there today. We're talking about 15 minutes. You can do it in your living room, and it's how I maintain a baseline, really, for most of my days. Otherwise, things tend to fall apart very quickly.
Yeah. Well, it's those habits, right? The practices
Definitely.
that we create for ourselves. I mean, I every morning before I do anything work-wise, I take my dog on a 15, 20-minute walk, and I leave myself on a home. So it's something that I do for myself to get fully present. But before our producer gets mad at me, I wanted to move us into the very last part of this, which is about leadership and modeling trust. So how do you see this idea of self-trust impacting the way that businesses grow and teams are led?
Sure. So this is about empowering individuals' strengths. This is applicable at the corporate level or at the startup level. So when you are trying to grow, everyone talks about efficiency. And the efficient thing to do in most situations is to be able to enable individuals to operate within their strengths. And if you're hiring someone, it is to do a job that you cannot do on your own, right? So if you're a manager of that team and you put someone on that team to do a job, it's because you're not going to be the one doing it, or you don't want to be the one doing it. And there's power in the multiplier effect of being able to enable those to do this. So when I think of this as a leader, I think about cultivating self-trust within the individuals that I work with. And that is when I do career development with individuals, or I schedule very intentional one-on-ones with my, it's called my direct reports, but really my peers in this journey. It is about connecting with them, who they are, not just what is going on in the business. And it is about hearing what is affecting them in their personal life, how are they feeling professionally, and are the things that they're working on and what we're working on as a whole, is that still aligned with their values? And are they being able to exhibit their strengths in the day-to-day of how we're operating? If not, why not? In either of those two categories. One, most people, a lot of people, I need to do this quite often, Sometimes it can take just a quick reminder of, oh, I do need to check in with what my values are and whether or not this is aligned, as well as am I operating within my strengths? And if you don't know what those two things are for yourself, don't
Mhm.
feel discouraged, because I often forget or don't, or they change, right? So for me, being able to understand my values and to continue to ideally reflect them with how I spend my time and energy is a daily practice. I have to look in my journal to see what my current values are and remind myself how I plan to make decisions that day based on those values. If you're earlier on, and I truly believe you can do this as a company. If you are very intentional with the values you set as a company, it enables a self-trust decision-making framework all the way down the chain, where folks are able to make decisions within the scope of those values without being afraid that they are going to be misaligned with the rest of the organization. So when values are done very, very well, you're creating another enabler of self-trust in those situations. And the more confidence you can encourage downstream, the more autonomy you're enabling throughout your organization, which is ultimately going to lead towards more productivity and efficiency and less issues.
100%. And that enabling that level of self-trust within everyone creates collective trust
Yes.
amongst everybody. And then you brought up two other really, really powerful, important conversations to have with oneself as well as a team, which are values. It's really important to know what your personal and professional values are, and then have an opportunity to collectively share those values. So and how that relates back to the work, which sometimes people don't do, and then strengths as well. You know, what are your strengths, but not just something that you're good at, that it's something that you're good at and it energizes you, because sometimes people can be good at something, but it can be draining for them. And it's observable to see when someone's good at something, but it's not always observable to know when it's energizing. It requires communication and asking and being able to share those things out loud. And when people know what each other's strengths are, or have an opportunity to identify what those are as a team, now you can leverage each other even more and get a lot more done, a lot faster, a lot easier, versus, sometimes there's this hesitancy to have those conversations because it's like, oh, it's just another meeting and I don't want to take time out of their day. No, this is the importance of slowing down to speed up and having these important dialogues. Yeah.
Could not agree more. And you see it a lot in early stage entrepreneurship, which is where I spend a lot of my time, especially for founders who haven't systemized their leadership systems yet, which effectively makes them a key dependency somewhere in the organization. And when that happens, or even if you're at the start of your journey, you're doing everything. And that is the reason why you're so exhausted all the time, because you are not operating solely within the areas that are, one, taking advantage of your skill set. One of your skill sets might be adaptability and it might be resiliency. It probably is, if you're pursuing entrepreneurship, but it doesn't mean that your ability to do everything, even if it's extremely well, compared to, I would say, most of us. I will admit that I do a lot of things in an average way, but an average way is often enough to be able to move the ball forward. And the goal is to eventually get myself out of the average way, to get out of the way of the average way. So someone who is spectacular at what they do can ultimately take that on and run with whatever foundation that I put in place. So that is where I see a lot of entrepreneurs run into, you and I talked about burnout. And I know that's that topic could be an episode for you, but you see it a lot with people who are extended too far deeply into dependencies of their business that just don't give them energy.
That's usually what it is. Part of sometimes it's because they're doing too much, and it would be good to delegate or hire somebody to take on some things, because if your business is growing and things are going well, you are going to get to a point where you cannot do it all anymore. But yeah, that paying attention to what you're good at and what energizes you, that takes some deeper sense of self-awareness, and then honesty with yourself as well. So last question before I wrap us up. What would you say to somebody who admits that they don't fully trust themselves right now? Like, where should they begin? What's that first step?
For sure. I would say they've already taken it. So there's the honesty and being able to accept it and to be vulnerable about it. So one, if someone tells that to me, we will celebrate that together, because it is really difficult to get to the point where you are willing to take the mask off and to admit to yourself that you don't have everything together. That is often the first step in any sort of transformation. So if you do not feel like you trust yourself and you want to change it, that has to be the second part
Yep.
of that statement, right? You can feel a certain way and self-pity and self-doubt and not want to change it. And that's not going to move you anywhere. There's no amount of help that you or me could provide to that person to help change. But assuming that they do want to change, um, typically I would start with taking a step back and attempting to understand where is the lapse in self-doubt affect or in self-trust affecting them the most in their lives right now, and starting there. So if it is in a personal relationship, and if you do not trust yourself to, I don't know, compliment your partner or to show up to a social event because of anxiety and what will happen. It is about creating small opportunities for you to create growth in the in the direction that you want to. And also, I would say, even though I know it can be difficult, you have to extend a, maybe not have to, but I have personally needed to extend a level of transparency to those in those situations, whether it's business, whether it's personal, to say, look, here's what I'm dealing with. Here's how I want to show up. I don't trust, here is my fear of not being able to show up that way. And you start to remove that fear of perception that we started with, because that's where a lot of our, lizard brain fitting in with the tribe fear exists, is fear of perception. So if you can de-risk that fear of perception, whether it's in a business meeting or whether it's in a personal context, try to pick a low stakes one, start there, right? Group of friends or a small business meeting of very trusted, or even a one-on-one with your manager or with your direct team, and start to show up in a place of vulnerability and being able to understand more deeply then in those situations, where does the fear exist? And the more you find yourself leaning into those fear points, the more I've found, one, you create growth in the direction that you want to, because the things that were scary will either present themselves as, well, this was a fear with no basis and is no longer a fear once you do it enough, or it becomes a fear tied in something that is more deeply rooted inside you, and you can start to create progress in that direction, either with self-development work, by working with someone like you, Alanna, or by doing it yourself. But that will start to kind of dislodge some of these roadblocks, I would say, that allow you to build that relationship with yourself around self-trust. And what I started with around celebrating the vulnerability, the reason why that is so key, and even extending that vulnerability to group situations where folks can reinforce you, is because there is a level of, I don't want to, it's not weakness. And I'm trying not to overuse the word vulnerability here, but
No,
there
but
is this,
vulnerability, use it,
yeah,
because we need to normalize believe it or not, a couple of years ago when I was working in my full-time role at Cisco, we actually got to use that word during the conversation about trust. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really cool that
yeah.
I was like, we're actually using the B word, like, so you
Yes.
continue to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, then that's it then, right? You have to have a level of vulnerability with yourself and to accept that, to be able to then turn the lens inward and to say, I actually trust myself. I see what's going on. I am not resenting myself for it. I'm not judging myself for it, because it is those negative emotions that start to put distance between you and that self-trust in yourself. And the more you can dislodge those negative emotions and reduce the noise, the more you can start to trust that whatever you're putting out into the world is something that is aligned with you and is intentional. And again, what happens after that is out of your control. But the beauty of having things out of your control is there's almost total freedom at that point. You've actually taken full accountability and control of the thing that is possible for you to do. Everything else that happens after that is irrelevant to you and to that work of trusting yourself. Of course, you may want to work on over time, developing some higher level skills around how to be influential in business, how to more deeply empathize with people in conversation, but you have to start with yourself, right? You have to start with that self-trust to then be able to work upwards from there and to decide how you want to show up or how you want to communicate in certain situations. But that self-trust is the foundational layer. And if you feel distanced from it, take a moment right now and to self-evaluate that there is something that is existing there that is stopping you from being able to do it. It is not you. You're not broken, and it doesn't not exist. There is something that's in the way.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add to all that is self-judgment, like to take that, the way that vulnerability becomes strengthening is by taking self-judgment out. And then you mentioned the word fear, and two fun acronyms to correlate with that when you're feeling the fear, and then you can name it that it's an actual fear. Remember that sometimes it's false evidence appearing real. And then the one that I really love that's energizing is face everything and rise to the occasion, right? Like face everything and rise. And then I add on to it to the occasion. So, well, Chris, I could talk about all of it for a couple more hours on this stuff, but really quick, those that are here live or those that are watching this recording, I'd love to hear from you. Like if you could rebuild trust with yourself in even just one area of your work or life, where would it make the biggest difference for you? And share it in the comments. But Chris, thank you for being here with me tonight and sharing your perspective. It
was my pleasure.
Yeah. So will you share with everyone where people can find you and learn more about you and your work and your show?
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. So my name is Christopher Sherrick. I am the host of Warm Blooded Founders. That is through my personal page on LinkedIn. It is for who I believe are warm-blooded people who want to learn how to lead with people first priorities. The warm-blooded title comes from a play on the opposite of how we've traditionally celebrated cold-blooded transactional CEOs in the past. If that concept resonates with you, connecting with people and leading people through trust, empathy, and human connection, come check out the show. We have a lot of insights, clarity, amazing guests on the show. For those who are founders who are in that 2 to 10 million swamp and are having difficulty systematizing leadership, follow Exegy Partners. We'll link that in the comments. And finally, if you're someone involved in the hearing health space, or if you have someone who is dealing with hearing health problems in their life, and whether it's you or whether it's a family member, follow Tonotop. We're doing incredibly impactful things in that space. I'm super excited about it. I love that. Tonotop for me, Alanna, is my ability to create impact, and Exegy Partners is my ability to be able to help multiply the effects of my learnings, my team's learnings on other entrepreneurs, and to help them create the impact that they want to create. And Warm Blooded Founders is just a way to celebrate that, to show up and to start normalizing some of these conversations around vulnerability, trust, things that are so important in today's virtual work sphere, So I'm super grateful to be on your show tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the things I'm involved with and to plug the various ventures and my show. But I was here for you. You're awesome. And I wish you the best of luck with the show. And I hope to be on it again in the future.
Yeah, well, yes, we'll figure that out. So yes. And for those that tuned in tonight, we appreciate you being here live with us. And for those that are catching the recording, be sure to follow my business page on LinkedIn, and our producer will be putting that in the chat. And then also head over to my website at ilovemylife.com /newsletter. And that's where I share some tools, techniques, stories, behind the scenes stuff, and other things that I'm up to. And I'd love to hear from you. So if there's any topic that you would love for me to cover and talk about on Alchemize with Alanna in the future, and if you have an interest in being a guest, let me know. But other than that, thanks again for being here, and let's keep alchemizing together. So
let's keep alchemizing, Alanna. Thanks so much. Take care.